Hi everyone, it's Will, back for a 1906 diary entry. One that is particularly rich, I would say. And my shirt is missing a button. Apologies for that. I love it, and so I am going to keep it despite the fact that it has other issues as well, some rips and things like that. So it's not a Russian peasant shirt, it's a Swiss peasant shirt. But enough about that. Yes, a long diary, a very, very short diary entry today, followed by a long and, as I say, very rich diary entry. So let's get started. The first is 27th May. It was a Saturday, and it was written in Ilyinskoye. So here we go. We arrived safely. It's a frightful bore. I want to cry. That's all. That's the entire diary entry. I don't know what time it was that they arrived, but yeah, our poor little friend was very unhappy. All right, now we have 28th May, Sunday. I miss Peterhof so much. It's just terrible. It's like sadness for the motherland. It's not cozy here, it's not nice, and I'm so sad without all the people I love so much, and whom it was so heartbreaking to leave. I feed the crows, my friends, and this one obviously thinks that since I'm outside, he should get some food. Sorry, that was not Dimitri. All right. I'm so sad without all the people I love so much, and whom it was so heartbreaking to leave. When I think about my life over the past month, I really want to cry, and cry hard. I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel alone. Maria is sucking up to Aunt and thinks she's a big deal. And I'm walking around in a daze. I just can't get used to the idea that we're here forever. Yes, God grant that when we go on the 22nd, Aunt said we would, we'll stay there longer. That's not the way I expected to feel about dear, now loathsome, Ilyinskoye. At 8 o'clock this morning we had coffee, and then at 9:30 went to church. Afterwards, Maria and I went bike riding in the park. At 12:30, Aunt went to Moscow for a committee meeting, and at 1 o'clock we had lunch on the terrace because it was so warm. Then I took out the lathe that Prokofiev made. It's so nice that it's a pity to use it. After that, I played soldiers with Borya, and at 4:30 had tea. Then I went fishing with GM and A.I. Nikitin. I caught a perch. Then Mashkovsky came, and we went for a ride before dinner. Aunt came back at 7:30, and after dinner I played cards and then billiards with Mashkovsky. Now I want to go to bed and cry. 9:20. All right, poor fellow. I think I'm going to start saying tёtya instead of aunt when I read these, because it just sounds weird to say aunt. And tёtya is the Russian word for aunt and the word that Dmitri uses. All right, so what's the problem here? When he first got to Peterhof, he was very unhappy to have gone there. And now he's so heartbroken about leaving that he even compares it to sadness for the motherland, the Russian word rodina, which I've never heard used before in such a context. To say that a town where one spent a month is like leaving the motherland. And there's almost a certain amount of prescience there, isn't there? I mean, yeah, within 10 years, a little more than 10 years, he would be leaving the motherland for good, never to return. So why was Peterhof so great? When at first he thought it was going to be uncomfortable and a bore. Well, I think because of the people. I think because he and Maria were more integrated, despite the fact that Ella was there. Some of the time in Peterhof, he and Maria were more integrated into Nicholas and Alexandra's life and spent more time with them. And Dmitri went kayaking and did things with Uncle Nicky, and I think he wasn't expecting that. And so he had a marvelous time against his own expectations. And he got some attention also from other men who were part of the entourage. He was essentially living in a female-headed household, and at 14 he needed some interaction with men, and apparently he got that, and he refers to the people I love so much and whom it was so heartbreaking to leave. So more than just Nicholas and Alexandra, I think, although primarily I would guess that it was the time he got to spend with Nicholas that made it so good for him. So Ilyinskoye has always been dear, but now it's become loathsome. And why is that? Well, he's not part of Nicholas and Alexandra's cozy little family anymore. He's removed from all that. Aunt Ella Gyotya is quite preoccupied with other things. She's going to a committee meeting in Moscow at 12:30 and not coming back to 7:30 in the evening. And Maria and Dmitri really want a hands-on parent. But interestingly, he doesn't say anything about his fear that he wrote about when he was in Peterhof about the place just being overrun with Ella's wounded soldiers. So apparently that fear was not realized. He feels like he's in a comfortable environment in the sense of not always being confronted with people he doesn't know. So that's reading between the lines, because if that had become an issue right off the bat, I think he would have mentioned that. But we'll see, because we've got a ways to go. It's 28th May, and Ella is telling them that they're going to leave Ilyinskoye on the 22nd, so the 22nd of June, I'm sure. And he says that when we go on the 22nd, but he's not telling us where they're going to go, if they're going to go back to the main residence in Moscow, or if, as I would guess, they're going to make another trip to Tsarskaya Selo. And he's careful to put in parentheses that Aunt said we would, and so it's not theoretical. He's feeling like, well, she said we would, so we're going to go. And he's hoping that they'll stay there longer than, apparently he gets the impression that she is conceiving of it as a brief trip, but he's hoping they'll stay longer. So what's wrong with Ilyinskoye? Well, I feel alone. And I'm walking around in a daze. So the whole thing about walking around in a daze is an expression that Dmitri uses frequently as well in his diary entries when he's really feeling at sea and depressed. He'll use that phrase, I'm walking around in a daze. And he also uses it on one occasion when something happens that fills him with joy, and that something is that he visits, for the first time after the revolution, he gets to see Marie of Romania, whom he had written in his diaries was his one true love. And he gets to see her when she comes to London. And he's terribly keen on asking her whether she had loved him too. They had this problematic thing going on in 1908, I believe. And that was, Dmitri was still a teenager, and she was old enough to be his mother. and there are he said, she said accounts of what happened, and there was a little family scandal. I might have mentioned that before, but at any rate, he continued to believe that he had been in love with her, and he was desperate to find out if she had reciprocated that love, if he'd interpreted that correctly. And so she's nice to him. She says, "Oh yes, I was fond of you." And he tells us that in the diary, but he seems to be reading more into it than what his quote of her would indicate, because on that particular occasion he also talks about walking around in a daze all day, but in this instance in a daze where he's just filled with joy, as he makes clear. But here at Ilyinskoye, lots of teen angst, and he feels alone. His sister is focused on, according to him, his sister is focused on endearing herself to Ella. And she's also acting like, yeah, the big deal. She's 16, he's 14, and she's, yeah. I mean, any of you who have an older sister will get that picture. I certainly felt that my older sister was terribly puffed up at times, but that's another issue. Okay, so it's an interesting take on this idea that Maria was, well, sucking up to. I could have found a better way of expressing that, and I will if I proceed to publish my translations. But for the moment, we get the idea. And if you read Maria's memoirs, the first volume, the A Princess in, The Education of a Princess, you'll see quite a lot of bitterness and quite a lot of blame directed at Ella for being a cold fish and not being there for the children, and even sort of expressing resentment of them. And I wonder if that came later, after Maria was sort of pushed into a marriage, beginning when she's 16. This marriage is proposed between her and a young prince of Sweden, William or Wilhelm, and Paul was the one, Dmitri and Maria's father, was the one who sort of put the brakes on that and said, no, my daughter is not getting married until she's 18. But it turned out to be a disastrous marriage, and so maybe looking back when she was writing her memoirs, I think the late 20s or early 30s, maybe all her resentment of that turn of events with Ella came out. But right now, if we believe Dmitri, she and Ella were fairly close. Maybe Maria wasn't sucking up to Ella, although it would certainly be justifiable if she was, because who do these children have in their lives? And Maria was of an age, certainly, when she wanted female guidance and a female role model. But yeah, as I say, it's interesting because I always got the impression that Dmitri was the one who was very actively trying to endear himself to people, especially through his humor and his jokes. Well, maybe that worked better with men than with women, but he persists in thinking that Maria has the edge with Aunt Ella. Okay, and he feels alone, and you know, GM is there, and there are these other men that he talks about that he's playing billiards with and going fishing with, although I don't think they live there all the time. Maybe they come for weekends from Moscow or something like that. And it's difficult for him. Uncle Nicky isn't around anymore. The officers who are on duty at the Alexander Palace on any given day are not there. He's apart from the 2nd Guards Rifle Battalion. He'd gotten used to all those things, and he actually was with, I recently came across the information that he was actually in Tsarskaya for 6 months. And so we miss about 3 months of that, unless at some point his 1905 diary turn up, which would be very interesting. But I doubt it, because I think the Russian lady who sent these volumes to me, having had access to them in the archive, the historical archive in Russia, I think she would have included those if there were diaries for 1905. All right, so, and he's so worried that we're here forever. And when he says we're here forever, I don't think he means Ilyinskoye, because he knows that Ella's yearly routine is not to spend the year round at Ilyinskoye, especially not in the winter. But I think what he's saying is we're here forever in the sense of, well, now Tjotja has recovered from the time and the space she needed after her husband's death, and now we're back to being her children and in her care. So this is why Ilyinskoye has become loathsome to him, apparently. And he's sort of regressing a little bit to playing soldiers again with Borya. It sounds like not very enthusiastically. So, we see what he's doing. It's a country estate. He's going on bike rides in the park with his sister. He's playing toy soldiers with Borya. He's playing billiards and cards with Mashkovsky, and he's going fishing, and those would all sound like enjoyable activities for a boy of his age. Apparently his lessons are over for the year, because he doesn't mention any. And he himself is taking an interest in this. Now, the word he uses is lathe, but I'm thinking of a lathe as something that's made out of metal, or, Prokofiev was his sort of wood shop teacher, and he uses the verb that Prokofiev made this lathe. So I wonder if I've somehow misunderstood that. I'll have to run that by one of my friends who's native Russian speaker. But yeah, maybe Prokofiev made the lathe, and Dmitri wanted to bring it with him. Okay, so who is Mashkovsky? Mashkovsky, I have very little information on, but I believe he was attached to Grand Duke Sergei and to the household in some way. So his first name was Mikhail. So he was Mikhail Vasilyevich Mashkovsky, and he was born in 1875, so he was still a young man, and he was an officer in the Kiev regiment, although he doesn't have a Ukrainian name, and he appears to be living in Moscow, and if he was attached to Grand Duke Sergei, then yes, he would have been living in Moscow. I don't know who A.I. Nikitin is, or if he was in permanent residence at Ilyinskoye, or one of her entourage. So Borya, I've been meaning to mention, Borya ended up just up the road from me, although alas, he died before I could meet him. He left Russia through the Far East after the revolution and went into China, and then from there he immigrated to the Pacific Northwest. Although he retired there, so he went to California. He at some point got a university degree as a petroleum engineer or something like that, and then he retired in Seattle. And so, I wish it would be so fascinating to read his memoirs or his letters or his diary entries, and I haven't been able to find anything. And, I'm still constantly hoping that something will turn up. So his full name was Boris Georgievich Laming, and he's not mentioned in the diaries after the revolution. You know, I think just because there was such a geographical distance between him and Dmitri, but and they'd probably, Borya had gone off to school at some point. He's only about 7 or 8 at this point, and he would have gone off to a military school, and so he and Dmitri probably grew apart to some extent. But anyway, gosh, I'm talking awfully slow today. I don't know what's up with that. Thank you for watching, as always, and we'll continue to see what Dimitri's mood, what happens if he has a turnaround like he did when he was in Peterhof, and we'll continue to see life in Ilyinskoye unfold and what life was like there during the summer. Some contact with peasants and various quite interesting things, I think. So I will see you next time. Bye.